There's a heartbeat louder than thunder. Revolution is in the air. There's a heartbeat deep inside our mother. Are you too cool to care?
You've got it.
Heartbeat Alaska is brought to you in part by Coca-Cola.
By Cook Inlet Region Incorporated, an Alaska Native corporation promoting economic and social progress for people throughout the state.
By the generous support of the Alaska Native Health Board.
By the Alaska Commercial Company, Alaska's leading retailer of food, family apparel, and general Alaska merchandise since 1867. Hello and welcome to Heartbeat Alaska. I'm Jeannie Green, bringing you Native news across the North. Thank you so much for joining me. If we haven't covered your village, it's about time we did, and that includes villages across Canada, Greenland, and the Russian Far East, and of course soon to be in the Lower 48. And speaking of the Lower 48, today we travel to Mole Lake, Wisconsin for the 5th annual Protecting Our Mother Earth Conference, put on by the Indigenous Environmental Network. We have all that plus much more, but first, here's Gary Fife with Native news across the nation.
This is Native News Across the Nation. I'm Gary Fife. The U.S. Supreme Court has refused to hear a case filed by 3 South Dakota cities that are challenging a tribe's authority to control sales of alcohol on its reservation-controlled lands. Indian Country Today reports June 29th that the High Court let stand a federal appeals court ruling that upholds the authority of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. The South Dakota cities of Timberlake, Isabel, and Dupree tried to hold off attempts by the tribe to enforce its liquor laws over non-native businesses located on tribal fee lands. The tribe says it was fighting alcohol abuse on the reservation, and the Supreme Court's decision was a victory for tribal sovereignty and for tribal health. A state district court judge in Alaska may soon be dismissing charges against Alaska natives from the village of Chickaloon in a criminal case that would have involved the native sovereign rights of the village. Judge Peter Ashman says he intends to dismiss the charges against Chickaloon villagers for driving without a state license or registration for their vehicles. The villagers say they're using licenses issued by a sovereign native government, the village, and that they do not need the state documents. Chickaloon villagers say the court decision will help force the state to recognize the sovereignty of tribes in Alaska. Officials from the state attorney general's office say they intend to fight such a decision, claiming that they cannot be ordered to stop enforcing their traffic laws for a certain segment of the population. Judge Ashman has given the state of Alaska 60 days to show good cause as to why he should change his mind. The use of snow machines and a major change in diets may be leading to a shrinking in physical height among Inuit of northern Canada. The Toronto Globe and Mail reports a University of Toronto study that has been observing residents of the village of Igloolik in the Northwest Territories. The study says in almost every age group there has been a significant reduction in height over the last 25 years. Scientists say the Inuit are 7/10 of an inch shorter than 20 years ago, and that the rough jarring of the spinal column due to snow machine use is responsible for the shrinkage in men. Among Inuit women, the study says the suspect is the store-bought diet that may be lacking vitamins that prevents loss of calcium in the bones. The Native American man convicted of spying while on duty as a U.S. Marine Guard in the former Soviet Union is up for parole. Clayton Lone Tree of Navajo, Winnebago has been in federal prison for 6.5 years after being convicted of passing secret information to an espionage agent from that former Soviet Union. This week, the U.S. Marine commander at the Marine base in Quantico, Virginia, approved a military court's recommendation that Lone Tree's sentence be reduced. That reduction makes Lone Tree eligible for parole, but no date was given as to when that might take place. The U.S. Attorney General's office in Arizona has announced federal grand jury indictments against 4 Arizona men for trafficking in unlawfully removed archaeological resources. The indictment says the group removed a ceramic pot, staff, and a number of wooden bows from a cave on the San Carlos Apache Reservation, and the cave was a religious shrine. During the undercover investigation, a federal agent reported a defendant as attempting to sell the bows, saying that they were, quote, hotter than a $2 pistol, unquote. No date was given as to when the 4 would get their chance to defend themselves in federal court. And finally, this coming week will see the 34th annual celebration of the World Eskimo Indian Olympics in Fairbanks, Alaska. This year's event is dedicated to the memory of Chief Walter Northway, traditional chief of interior Alaska tribes. 19 events, such as the grueling knuckle hop or the 1-foot high kick, test Native athletes in contests designed to reflect skills needed for survival in the Arctic. The 34th annual Games begins Wednesday, July 20th. This is Native News Across the Nation. For Heartbeat Alaska, I'm Gary Fife.
Thanks, Gary. We'll return with some powwows across the nation right after these messages.
Heartbeat, louder than thunder. Revolution is in the air. No matter if you like it mild and sweet, or if your favorite foods are hot and they're spicy, Coca-Cola Classic fits every mood. With every kind of food, there's always Coca-Cola, yeah. Coca-Cola, always Coca-Cola. There's a heartbeat.
Heartbeat Alaska is brought to you in part by the Chugach Alaska Corporation, a corporation committed to profitability, celebrating its heritage and ownership of its lands. Chugach Alaska Corporation, assisting in operating the Job Corps Center in Palmer, Alaska, and recruiting students statewide, working to better the lives of all Alaskans.
There's a heartbeat.
Please remain standing now. Just a few more minutes here.
Suhede shukochte tana, suhede shukochte tana, ya kuste, aketa chikana, askaude
Haji Badak Mastare Pire.
That, of course, was video from 1994 Spirit Days held here in Anchorage, Alaska. Some of those dancers were the New Claim dancers from Sitka, Alaska. And speaking of Sitka, thank you, Corrine E. Brown from Sitka, for sending me some seaweed I'd show you, but of course, it's all gone by now. Let's travel now to Mole Lake, Wisconsin for the 5th annual Protecting Our Mother Earth Conference. Video compliments of Steve Simmons.
On behalf of the network, we welcome you today. This is our second day. We have a full agenda.
The beautiful Chippewa Reservation in Wisconsin was selected as the site for the 5th annual Protecting Our Mother Earth Conference. Before the reservation was incorporated, the Mole Lake Chippewa lived in extreme poverty. Except for a cook stove, there was little or no furniture in their tar paper shacks. The principal means of gaining a livelihood for this group were boat building, gathering wild rice and wreath greens, and selling souvenir bows and arrows and other novelties. The soil and sandy loam with gravel outcroppings yield fair crops of potatoes and vegetables, oats, clover, and timothy hay. Game on the reservation includes deer, muskrat, and waterfowl. In 1968, the Chippewa received additional land, which brought their reservation size to just under 2,000 acres. Today, the Chippewa continue to harvest rice and spear fish as they always did. Utilizing the state-of-the-art technology and research, the Chippewa continue to protect the resources for future generations. With the advent of gaming, casinos, and bingo, the tribe has continued with an old-age Chippewa tradition of playing games of chance. The introduction of bingos in casinos drastically altered unemployment on the reservation from 80% to 10% in a couple of years. This enabled the surrounding communities to benefit financially and reduced federal dependence from tribal members. Today, the tribe plans to utilize its money wisely by spending it on cultural restoration projects, environmental planning of the resources, and education of its members and social programs that enhance the general health and welfare of the tribe. The Mole Lake Reservation is located in the upper middle part of the state of Wisconsin. This time of year has warm to hot days with an average temperature of 76 degrees and cool nights. The perfect setting for the 5th annual Protecting Our Mother Earth Conference.
Is that we all felt that it was a very important issue, that there's been a long history of things that have been going on within our territories that have been literally killing our people, our children, our elderly, and then affecting the health of our people. And this is the whole area of nuclear colonialism. That's what we picked, that word, colonialism. And that we have been
The annual regional gatherings began in 1986 at Mole Lake, when Exxon was threatening the community with a huge sulfide mine. It's appropriate then that they returned in 1994, as Exxon has returned to its mining project.
And the Navajo nations, but also has taken place in Canada, a lot of the Cree territories. There's contaminated sites to this day of tailings that have been leaving contaminated water, affects the air, the quality of air. So this uranium, our people have mined this uranium in the Southwest. As those of you that know about that, we have a lot of Dene miners who are dead right now because of respiratory diseases, cancer. They're no longer here. And this has been...
The poisoning of the environment with nuclear waste has far-reaching effects all the way to Point Hope, Alaska and Project Chariot.
Now, what had happened that had not been told to the community was that radioactive materials had been brought into their community and released for testing. They had taken from the Nevada test site, from the Sedan experiment, radioactive materials. They had brought up different radioactive elements, and they had let them go into a creek to supposedly study this. Now, it's really fascinating because they ended up putting out this really huge book. The site is called Cape Thompson, and there's a huge book you can get, about this big black book. And the scientists for many years used that whole area as a research area. So you can look up in the book and you can go, oh, on such and such a date, they collected a ground squirrel, and they have got the locations where exactly that ground squirrel was picked up. But when it came to finding the maps for where they had released the radioactivity, they just didn't happen to have any. Now, what they happened to have was what they said was a schematic design, where they thought the different plots were on this one sheet of paper. It was only one sheet of paper they had, and that it was sort of like this somehow. It was really fascinating. And so they said, oh no, you know, we had it well armed and well guarded. It was well taken care of. Everything was done really well. After we released it, you know, we cleaned it up and we put it in this huge mound. Again, all of this was without the knowledge, consent, or agreement of the peoples. And this particular area where they put this radioactive active material is a hunting area. It's an area that people, when they're traveling between communities, stay. And there were several families who were living there in traditional sod homes that are in the earth like that. And 3 generations of that family, they don't exist no more, and they all died of cancers. Now, when they did this cleanup like that, they put it there, and the papers got released. So we went up there, we were asked to come up, and we brought up a scientist, we brought up some equipment, because the community wanted to be trained on how they can monitor what is going on.
For years, the people in Point Hope have expressed concern about a contaminated dump site outside of the village, but have been told by the federal government that the dumping of radioactive waste never happened. So they continued their subsistence activities at Cape Thompson, since this has been a traditional hunting site for the village. The people of Point Hope believe that this contamination is to blame for the increase of cancer deaths in their community. A series of meetings have been held in Point Hope as federal, state, and borough officials attempted to find answers to the villagers' questions. In one of these meetings held on September 19, several elders and community officials spoke about their concerns and experiences at Cape Thompson.
We're just finding out what has been hid from us as a people. Our land looks good from the top when you look at it.
The villagers have demanded that the federal government clean up the site as soon as possible.
But there are five holes that are still in the ground. The community said, we want these tested. We want to know if there are nuclear devices still in place here, or if they were put in place here. Department of Energy says no, they were never put there. However, there were documents that said that they were in place. So there is a question that exists. When the community asked for that testing, what they did was they drove over there, and they had handheld equipment. Those holes are 750 feet to 1,000 feet in the ground. This is not going to answer this question. So that question still remains. One of the devices was going to be a 200T device, which is bigger, I understand, than anything that's been put off at the test site. Now, the elders of the community up there, they were talking, and they said that in that land base right there, that's where the continental plates meet. That is also a place where there are water sources for the whole community. Now, the scientists don't necessarily say this, but the people there, they do know what they're talking about, and they have grave concerns if this is still in their community. The people up there still need support and help. They're still trying to get the documents and find these informations, and they're still fighting. Also, some of the communities up there, of which Point Hope is one, and there are several others, were used as tests with radioactive materials, and they're working now. A lot of information is starting to come out on what is going on up there, and they're going to need people's help from everywhere together, that they can stop what's happening in their communities and that their health can be good.
There's a heartbeat louder than thunder, revolution.
From Yakutat to Barrow, Alaska newspapers publish news that makes a difference in your community. Information about events and activities that is timely, accurate, and dependable. Stories about people who make the news in your community. Stories about world events that affect your community. And stories that reflect the diversity of all Alaskans. If it makes a difference in your community, you can read about it in an Alaska newspaper. Subscribe now.
My name's Harry Walters, from Good News Bay, Heartbeat, Alaska.
My name's Richard. I'm from Saxman, Heartbeat, Alaska.
My name is Charlene Pauken from St. Mary's. I watch Heartbeat, Alaska.
My name's Walter Lincoln from Inupiat. I watch Heartbeat, Alaska.
Heartbeat of
Alaska. Oh, yeah. Well, got it.
Earlier in the program, I thanked Kareem Brown from Sitka for sending me some dried seaweed. Well, what do natives in Anchorage do if people in rural Alaska don't supply us with our native food? We go to George's Market. In fact, George's Market is the only store in Anchorage that sells native food, though at one time, his inventory had an international flavor.
I had French, Italian, Yugoslav, Greek, German, everything, all kind of stuff. But since I got all, I'm trying to get away from it. But the native folks, I have closed the place a couple different times, and they begged me to reopen because I'm the only one that knows enough about native food.
Spiro George opened George's Market in 1961. He never planned on specializing in native foods, but since that time, he's become quite a connoisseur.
Seal oil, you could tell by looks of it, you could tell by smell of it. If it's too strong, it's a little bit rancid. But I used to make it. I buy the blubber, and I make the seal oil, and I know how good it was, and that's why I said I could tell more about native food than I could tell about grocery.
Now, it may seem that I'm hinting for native food from rural Alaska, but it only seems that way. Speaking of rural Alaska, I received a call from a gentleman from Kipnuk, Alaska. He requested that I play more Cash 10. Well, we'll do it just for him. Sir, here you are, Cash 10, the most popular Canadian rock group, singing in their native tongue.
Whoa.
Thank you so much for joining me for another Heartbeat Alaska. Please remember to register and get ready to vote because we can make a difference in the primary and in the general election. For Heartbeat Alaska, I'm Jeannie Green. Send me your video and I'll see you next week.
À toi,